And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook for this rest of the weekend, Sunday into Monday. Starting out on this Saturday afternoon, March 2nd, we have extensive ice throughout the central northern Bering, all the way just past St. Matthew, now expanded down through Kuskokwim, Bristol Bays, and we do anticipate further ice growth in this region as some more colder air eventually does return, even though we do have a couple of frontal systems that are going to be spreading snow and blowing snow along the southwest coast, lower Yukon Delta, all the way up into St. Lawrence Island tonight and into Sunday. And then another round coming in Sunday night into Monday morning. As temperatures have turned colder, we've had cold outflow winds here into Cook Inlet and ice building there as well. So we're not anticipating any real big changes with the ice coming up here. If anything, it could grow a bit in some areas. But looking at the weather pattern, we have big high pressure out over northwest Canada, northern Canada here, center of high pressure just around and above 1040 millibars. Weakening low that kind of been sitting out here in the Gulf all week long. That's diminishing, but here comes next couple of lows out across the Bering. First front pushes inland tonight with areas of snow and blowing snow along northern areas of the Alaska Peninsula. Southwest coast on up towards St. Lawrence Island, where St. Lawrence Island is under a blizzard warning through at least Sunday morning. And then come Sunday afternoon, we have the next front approaching. The first one just kind of washes out, and then we have this secondary front that has another band of snow with it that'll move into the southwest, west coast and push up toward the Seward Peninsula, east end of Norton Sound as we go through later Sunday and into Monday morning. And all of this is going to be advancing eastward. But what will eventually happen as we get into next week is that the pattern is going to begin to shift out again. We're going to start to see the lows coming up out of the North Pacific back up into the Gulf. Secondary development along this front near and just east of Kodiak Island on Monday is the first in a series of lows. This next low will come up down from this region of the North Pacific. That one will be a little more compact and stronger, and that'll bring a round of winds and moderate to heavy precipitation along the Gulf Coast and into the Panhandle as we go through the midweek period. So looking at the marine forecast for the southeast on Sunday, strongest winds, Lynn Canal, northerly to 35 knots, 6-8 foot waves. Winds taper off the further south. You get a little not as windy here on the southern portion of the Panhandle, north 15 knots, Ketchikan, Metlakatla, 3 foot waves. Offshore flow is still 25-30 knots, swells 6 to 8 feet. Within the nearshore waters of the Gulf Coast. And then Monday, we expect winds to come down in the inner channels, 10 to 15 knots out of the north-northwest, waves 2 to 3 feet. Look for generally southeast to east 15-knot winds with swells around 5 feet there for Monday. Northwestern Gulf, northeast winds to 15 knots, Prince William Sound, a couple of foot waves. Still could have some northeast winds to 25 knots there, Kayak Island, the entrance of Hinchinbrook entrance. And then as we get back out here, the entrance of Cook Inlet is looking at easterly winds at about 25 knots with 5 to 6 foot swells. Come Monday, easterly winds within Prince William Sound, 15 knots, 3 foot waves. Easterly winds, 20 knots there outside of Hinchinbrook entrance along the coast of the Kenai. And then southeast to east winds to 25 knots with 7-8 foot swells there in lower Cook Inlet and at the entrance there. For Kodiak Island, Sunday, east winds to 15 knots. As we go down along the Alaska Peninsula, we can see winds southeast 25 knots either side, Chiknik, Port Hayden. Ice up there in areas of Bristol Bay, swells 5-6 feet on the North Pacific side, 1 to 2 feet on the Bering side. Monday, still winds are going to start to pick up from the southwest. Easterly winds 20 knots within Shelikof Strait, but then they flip around to the southwest, 25-30 knots along the length of the Alaska Peninsula, 5 to 7 foot waves along the Pacific side, 4 to as high as 8 foot waves north of Cold Bay on Monday. Across the Aleutian chain, winds will be south-southwest 25 knots here on Alaska Nikolsky, shifting west-southwest 30 knots as you get the Atka and Adak westward. By the time we get into Monday, generally across the Aleutian chain, we're anticipating Southwest to west winds right around 30 knots or so. Waves running, swells could be as high as 13, 15 feet on the North Pacific side toward the central Aleutians, 9 to 12 feet there through the eastern and central Aleutians on the Bering side. We've seen the ice in place here across, actually get a little bit further back there, just to the west and south of St. Matthew. Winds will be south-southeast around St. Matthew, St. Paul at 20 knots. We could see winds as high as 30 knots out of the southeast there in Kuskokwim Bay. Along the lower Yukon, south winds 25 to 30 knots, southeast winds across Norton Sound. But again, ice there in place. There could be some plinias try to open with that. Winds do come down Monday. Look for 20-knot southwest winds from St. Paul across through Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, and then along the lower Yukon Delta. Winds will be more offshore east-southeast as you get further up the Yukon and along Norton Sound. And then across the Bering Strait, easterly winds on Sunday at 30 knots. So with these easterly offshore flow, there could be some plinias try to open up here lower Chuck GC. Those winds do fall off to 20 knots from the east as you get up toward Wainwright, Utqiagvik, and then kind of a mixed bag winds there, Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik at 10 knots with plenty of ice. And then come Monday, winds do pick back up out of the east-northeast, 20 to 25 knots along the Arctic coast, as high as 30 knots off of Wainwright. Down through the lower Chuck GC, we're looking at east-northeast winds, 25 knots or so, and then passing through the strait, west side of the Seward Peninsula, east winds to 20 knots, and then east-southeast winds to 20 knots on the north side of St. Lawrence Island.